All right, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull makes me drink tequila. Uh, I had a really hard time trying to decipher and think what I wanted to say about this movie. I wanted to go back and rewatch it first off because of the new Indiana Jones Style of Destiny. And kind of revisit this movie because I haven't seen Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for like 10 years. And I vividly remember going into the theater and watching this movie way back in 2008, kind of really anticipating this movie because I wanted to see Harrison Ford, who is one of my favorite actors of all time, reprise this iconic role. And Shia LaBeouf also coming off the highs of Transformers from the year before, Disturbia, Eagle Eye, also in 2008, Holes. Just a really promising young actor who I was, in the time, in 2008, 2007, 2008, as a huge fan of Shia LaBeouf. And I still am. I think he's a really talented actor, personal life aside. So going into this movie, I was full of anticipation. Really excited for what the adventure may hold and seeing Indiana Jones on the big screen. For at that moment, the first time ever, because I never saw the original three movies at that time in 2008 on the big screen. I've since seen Raiders, and I'm also The Last Crusade. Still need to get that Temple of Doom watch on the big screen. That'd be awesome. But anyway. Whew. Anyway, that tequila. It's good stuff. I may take another shot. Who knows? Because this movie is... It's trying at times. This film is directed by Steven Spielberg once again, the director of the first three films. And this Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is written by George Lucas. And you could feel his writing style all over the movie, especially into that third act of the film, and we'll discuss that. Rewatching it this time, however, there's some stuff I really liked about it. However, the issues that I had, the stuff that really frustrated the crap out of me way back in 2008, still here. It doesn't irritate me nearly as much because I already kind of know that stuff's happening. I wish it wasn't happening. Speaking of Shia LaBeouf, Mutt Williams swinging through the trees with the apes, the aliens in the third act. Yeah, those are just to name a few things. However, as an adventure film, some practical effects, I think there's some stuff there that was better in this rewatch than it was that I gave than I gave it credit back in 2008. So let's jump into this movie and what it's all about and give you kind of my takes and opinions on this movie. And I would love to hear your takes and opinions down in the comments section down below if you're watching this on YouTube, but make sure you also check out our podcast as well. This movie takes place during the Cold War, where the Soviets, led by a sword-wielding Irina Spalko, who was played by Kate Blanchett, they are looking for this mysterious crystal skull, and they capture Indiana Jones to help them locate the crystal skull in this big giant warehouse with a really nice callback to the Raiders of the Lost Ark, with the Ark of the Covenant being stored in this warehouse. I really loved that back in 2008 when they do reveal that, and I still get a smile on my face when they do that little small cameo. One of the best cameos of 2008, I would have to say. So after the Soviets do locate the crystal skull, Indiana Jones has to get the heck out of there as fast as he can, and come to find out he wanders into this like nuclear testing site, and he jumps into a fridge, he sees some gophers, and the nuked fridge sequence does happen. It has a really cool shot of Indiana Jones walking up the hill with the big giant mushroom cloud. However, the nuke fridge sequence is where Indiana Jones becomes really crazy. The rest of the earlier franchise entries were really based off practical effects, and I loved those. I loved the original Star Wars practical effects too. However, they really rely on CGI in this one. That could be because Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, was up there in ages, but he wasn't as old as he was Nile, of course. So I don't understand the nuclear fridge sequence. I get because they're trying to relate it's the Cold War and they're building this bomb. It's kind of silly and it's ridiculous, really. And I can understand why people really hate that scene in that moment here for sure. Anyway, as Indiana Jones gets back out of being like tested for nuclear radiation, he goes back to his college life, and then a young man approaches him named Mutt Williams, played by Shia LaBeouf here, and he courses Indiana Jones and convinces him to go to Peru to help find a colleague of Indiana Jones's, played by Professor Oxley here. And that's where this kind of adventure really takes place. They get kind of wrapped back in the Soviets. They have to try to find this professor, their colleague. And that part, there's some really fun entertainment that does lead to them in Peru. It kind of feels like an adventure itself again. The things where I really have an issue with this Indiana Jones film is obviously that nuked fridge sequence. And then that third act. The third act, you can kind of see it's telegraphed where it's coming from. I don't know what I really expected back in 2008. That was a long time ago, but I know when they revealed it, that was actually aliens. I was like, big eye roll. I was like, what the heck? However, watching it now, it's kind of obvious that that's where it's going to go, and I can see kind of where it was telegraphed from the beginning. So this time it doesn't really mind me. I don't really mind it. But before we start talking about the negatives of this movie, I really want to talk about some things I really liked about it. And I feel like the world traversing, again, it felt like classic Indiana Jones, where they're going from place to place, trying to get to a clue here, to get to another location over here, to find the big MacGuffin of the entire film, which is the Crystal Skull, and try to locate a city of gold. I enjoyed those moments there. While it's not perfect like the other entries in the franchise, the previous entries, I should say, they do get it right there, and I feel like there's some really good adventure that they do have. Harrison Ford here has some good one-liners and some good chemistry, and it's really great to see him reprise his role. And while Shia LaBeouf is kind of feels like he's in a different movie, he's definitely a greaser, and they do play references to the time period with the greasers in there. I liked that. Shia LaBeouf is kind of distracting in this movie because it's kind of a bigger name actor at the time, and he kind of tries to overshadow with some of his dialogue Indiana Jones here. And Mutt Williams is not my favorite character in the Indiana Jones franchise, but at the same time, there's something about Shia LaBeouf that just you can't take your eyes off of me. He's kind of radiates your attention. He kind of requires it, you know. Cate Blanchett also is really pretty dang good in this movie. Kind of over the top, matching some crazy energy in this movie. And with her short bob of a haircut. I love Cate Blanchett, so I really could watch her in anything. It's just kind of weird that she is in this one as this big villain and doing her crazy kind of accent as well. I like that. My favorite part of the movie is when they reveal Karen Allen. I loved seeing Karen Allen in this, Marion Ravenwood from the first Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, and that's where the film's like, oh wait, Mutt Williams is Indiana Jones' son. And that's where it gets a little kind of wonky there, and people, I believe people thought or predicted that that's what's going to happen, but I don't think anybody in 2008 really suspected that that's where we're actually going to go. So when it was kind of revealed back in 2008, I remember like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense because it was pretty telegraphed that all of a sudden this kid would come back again. But needless to say here. And also surprisingly, this movie has a really high Rotten Tomatoes score. Researching this movie for kind of our award show that we're doing later in the month in July, it has like a 77. It's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Really crazy to think about that because now it's kind of universally panned for the most part in the franchise. As we get into that third act here, there's a sequences where they are taking these vehicles and going through the jungle, and that's where it's really CGI'd. And this movie really relies on the CGI. And coming back now, even though I have the 4K restorations of the movies, you could definitely tell where the CGI is really kind of wonky looking. Not as wonky as some sequences in Dial of Destiny, however, it's kind of bad, especially when you get Shia LaBeouf swinging through trees with monkeys. And you get this kind of crazy alien sequence near the end of the movie. And that, I don't know. I'm kind of beating a dead horse or from what other people have said about this movie. And while it's not as horrible as like one of the worst movies ever made, there's still some watchability factor here. There is still some really good Indiana Jones moments with his quirky dialogue and his fun mannerisms. But then you get taken out by some really bad CGI. I rather see practical effects here, where that I'm not going to be taken out of the sequence all the time. And this movie really feels more like a George Lucas movie than a Steven Spielberg movie. I would have been really interested to see if they would have got Steven to write this movie to try to get that character more fleshed out. Because I feel like Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade was like the perfect send-off to the character. And King of the Crystal Skull kind of feels like Indiana Jones going out with a whimper than a big hurrah like he probably should. And George Lucas has this way where he definitely relies on technology. He's kind of like James Cameron in a way, with like a B-level James Cameron. James Cameron has really great quality CGI effects, where George Lucas nowadays, recent George Lucas, not like the 80s George Lucas, recent George Lucas has kind of crazy wonky CGI effects. So seeing some of those moments doesn't really have that magic that Steven Spielberg really was bringing back in the time of this movie came out. All that said, I don't think this is a horrible movie. I think this is probably my least favorite in the Indiana Jones franchise. But Kingdom of the Crystal Skull really just kind of falls flat in a lot of the iconic moments of the franchise. When I think of the franchise, I'm not really thinking about any of the moments from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in a positive way, that is. I'm thinking more of the negative moments, as some of the worst moments in the franchise come from this movie. I do like some of the world building, like I said, and Harrison Ford's awesome here. But that's all I really had to say about the matter. There's not too much to say because that hasn't already been said. It's not horrible, but it could have been better. Anyway, guys, that's my quick takes on Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Hopefully you liked my rambling. And if you did, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. And also check out our podcast. You can find that in the show notes where you can get more content in your ears. Anyway, my name is Adam. Thank you guys so much for watching. Talk to you guys later.